Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to part 2 of Source Analysis. I am Ms. Jennifer Blank, and I'll be your guide on this journey. So on your screen, you see a Google search, right? So I put pandemics in history, very general search. And you see this is the first few hits that pop up, right? So I'm just going to, there's a lot of different sources, but we're going to take a look at the first 3 just to give you an idea of the kinds of things you should be looking for and should watch out for. Okay, so the first hit is from a website called LiveSciencecom, right? So we're going to go there, and so here's the site. There's a lot of ads, and you see 20 of the worst pandemics in history. So you look at the title. It's not loaded language, so that's a good sign. It's just very factual. These are 20 of the worst pandemics and epidemics and pandemics in history, right? And it does say 20 of the worst, so this implies an opinion. It's not loaded in the same way as you're saying this person was the worst example of whatever, or this event. But it does indicate an opinion by the author, that the author has selected these 20, and the author has identified Mr. Owen Jarris. He's a Live Science contributor. He did this about a month ago, right? So it's relatively recent, so we need to think about date. So that's about a month ago, so that's recent, right? But we should pay attention to worst, right? So before we continue, we need to think of who is this guy? Who is this Owen Jarris person, right? So I've already brought that up, and I'm going to click over to that right now. So if you look, there's his picture, and he's a Live Science contributor. So this is who he is. He writes about archaeology and all things about humans past for live science. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Toronto and a journalism degree from Ryerson University. Okay, so his credentials. Now, it doesn't mean that the stuff that he says is wrong or that it's inaccurate, but he's not a historian, okay? He's not a historian. He's not a scientist. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree and a journalism degree. So that is something to consider when you are looking at source material. But he does have a journalism degree. Now, journalists have ethics. They have methodologies. There are rules set in place for good quality journalism. So the fact that he has a journalism degree means he does have some qualifications to write about certain things. So in order to get a better idea of whether or not his article is legit, we need to read it, but we also need to take a look at the About Us area of the website. So if you go back here and you scroll up, you can go into More, and you see About Us right there. So you're going to click on that because you want to learn about the website that you're looking at. So this was done by Jenna Breyer, the editor-in-chief, and there's a description of what it is and a mission statement. So you want to pay attention to that. There's also the history that's there. Now, one thing you want to make a note of, nothing in here says peer-reviewed. Nothing in here specifies that experts will be used or consulted to verify the accuracy. There's not a specific statement about that. Again, doesn't mean that it's not accurate, but it should give you a little bit of pause, just a little. Okay, so you should keep that in mind. So let's go back to the article and let's take a look at it. All right, so plagues and epidemics have ravaged humanity throughout its existence, often changing the course of history. Okay, great. So throughout the course of history, disease outbreaks have ravaged humanity, sometimes changing the course of history and at times signaling the end of entire civilizations. Here are 20 of the worst epidemics and pandemics dating from prehistoric to modern times, right? So prehistoric epidemic, you can read about that. I'm going to scroll down to a particularly important pandemic, and that's where my students are going to be starting their research. We're going to start, the earliest pandemic that we're going to examine is going to be the Black Death from 1346 to 1353. Okay, so here's a cartoon there. Let's see what he has to say about it. Black Death traveled from Asia to Europe, leaving devastation in its wake. Some estimates suggest that it wiped out over half of Europe's population. It was caused by a strain of the bacterium Yersinia pestis that is likely extinct today and was spread by fleas on infected rodents. The bodies of victims were buried in mass graves. The plague changed the course of Europeans' history. With so many dead, labor became harder to find, bringing about better pay for workers and the end of Europe's system of serfdom. Studies suggest that surviving workers had better access to meat and higher quality bread. The lack of cheap labor may also have contributed to technological innovation. Okay, so one of the things I like about this is when you see that, that's a hyperlink, right? So you can click on that, and it's going to take you to other sites where he says studies suggest. Okay, that now he's pointing you toward the backup for this information that he said. He's saying studies suggest, but he's not definitively stating this was fact. And he's inviting you to go and check that out. So let's click that link and see where that takes us. What studies is he talking about? Okay, so this is, but it got better. Life improved after Black Death study finds by Stephanie Pappas, right? So now it requires you to read an additional article, and this is something that you can check out. Okay, now research, as you've undoubtedly figured out, takes a long time. You have to be prepared to invest the time. So if you're going to use this source, you need to do your due diligence, because we don't know that it's not trustworthy, but there's nothing specific that's really indicating that it is. Okay, so if we're asking about pandemics, that's health, that's science, right? You need doctors, you need infectious disease specialists, you need experts on that. It's also talking about history. So you need a historian, right? You need some historians that are experts in that area. So let's check out another source. This is the second hit. This is MPH Online. So outbreaks, 10 of the worst pandemics in history, and it's by staff. So we can't identify a specific author, right? But we can see the about section. So let's read about, right? I'm going to move my little camera guy down there. MPH Online is an independent online research for public health students. We offer expert information and guidance regarding public health degrees, with special emphasis on the Masters in Public Health. Here you will find rankings and reviews of the best public health programs, scholarship and financial aid information for public health students, and guides to a variety of public health careers. We are constantly updating and improving our site, so be sure to check back often, so on and so forth. So this site isn't a science site, okay? It's a clearinghouse. It's an area for students to go to find out about programs so that they can get additional degrees. Again, not a science site. Now, the author, or the guy who's in charge of media relations, he's worked for more than 15 years as a writer, editor, teacher, and consultant in higher education. His work has been published in more than 10 academic journals and magazines, as well as dozens of websites. So there's some credibility there, but we'd have to do further research to determine if this was also a reliable source. The next step will be to go and check out the article. So it starts out with an explanation of what a pandemic is, right? Scientists and medical researchers have for years differed over the exact definition of a pandemic. Is it a pandemic or an epidemic? Again, here's a hyperlink so you can get additional information. That's a good sign. But one thing everyone agrees on is that the word describes the widespread occurrence of disease in excess or in addition to what might normally be expected in a geographical region. Cholera, bubonic plague, smallpox, and influenza are some of the most brutal killers in human history. And outbreaks of these diseases across international borders are properly defined as pandemic, especially smallpox, which, throughout history, has killed between 300 and 500 million people in its 12,000-year existence, right? So they start out talking about the coronavirus, which, of course, we're dealing with currently, and then it moves into the AIDS pandemic, flu pandemic, and it goes through a variety of sources, or a variety of breakdowns. Now, this, again, we're not positive that this is completely accurate, because we're not seeing words like expert, and we're not seeing words like scientist and historian, right? So if you're looking at the history of pandemics, you want scientific and historical information that comes from experts, right? So now let's look at the third hit, or another hit rather, and this is the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This is a United States government website. So it doesn't have an author. So we're going to scroll. Sometimes you go all the way down to the bottom and you find interesting things. So let me move. All right. So CDC, USA.gov, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, right? And down here, about CDC. Let's go take a look at that. All right. So our mission and pledge. CDC works 24/7 to protect America from health, safety, and security threats, both foreign and in the U.S. Whether diseases start at home or abroad, chronic or acute, curable or preventable, human error or deliberate attack, CDC fights disease and supports communities and citizens to do the same. Okay, so it describes what the CDC is. And you go over here, this is their pledge to the American people. Be diligent stewards of the funds entrusted to our agency. Provide an environment for intellectual and personal growth and integrity. Base all public health decisions on the highest quality scientific data that is derived openly and objectively. Okay, right there, that's an indication that they're actually pulling from scientific data. Okay, that's an indication that tells you might be a little bit more reliable or accurate than some, or credible than some of the other sources that we took a look at. All right, so let's go back to the past pandemics and let's go up to the top of the article, right? So it's very brief. It's just a brief little thing. And it's got hyperlinks. It also has specific information on pandemics, right? Let's take a look. Let's just click one, right? Let's go to that. All right, so this is the 1918 pandemic, the so-called Spanish flu. So it offers a history. It has hyperlinks, okay, and it has comparisons. Now, when you scroll down, you see additional resources. This is highly helpful because it tells you this is where you can find useful information. And by mining an article like this for its sources, you look at who these people are. These are clearly academic journals. Right, this is from the U.S. Navy, so you're looking at some pretty reliable sources here. Journal of Science, right? American Journal of Epidemiology. So you have some valid sources here. So of these three, the CDC is going to be your most reliable source. I'm like, well, Ms. Blank, I do not have time to do everything you're telling me to do for all these sources. Okay, that's fine. I get it. We're all people and we have lives, right? We have things to do and we don't want to waste time doing everything I just did. Okay, well, one way to do this is to look at universities, right? So you're going to look for websites that end in .gov and .edu. Okay, so when you look, okay, there's a .org, .gov. Okay, looking good. .com, skip it. .com, oh yeah, we definitely are not looking to go to Wikipedia. No. All right, BBC, New Yorker, that's interesting. Go to the next page of hits. Right. The Federalist, Business Insider, Washington Post, WeForum, YouTube, Wired. Oh, goodness gracious. Miss Blank, are you telling me I got to scroll through everything? No, actually, you just go to Google Scholar. Go to Google Scholar, click that, and then you type it in. Whoops. It would help if I could actually type, ladies and gentlemen, and persons of indeterminate gender. Pandemics in history. Boom. Journal of Applied Microbiology. Books. Encyclopedia of Pestilence, Pandemics, and Plagues. See, these, ladies and gentlemen, now you're going to find peer-reviewed sources that were produced by experts and then reviewed by other experts to ensure accuracy. Okay, so after you get a basic idea of what it is you're studying, you start with our original search and you read. You got to read. You just have to. That's going to have to happen. So you read as much as you can, get a basic idea of what you're looking at, get the vocabulary down for what you're researching. Then you go to Google Scholar and you type in what you're looking for. You wouldn't type in pandemics. If you were assigned to Black Death, you'd see Black Death. Right? You just type that in, boom, and then, oh, look at all of this. Oh my goodness, look at all these amazing sources. And that is an example of how you do research, okay? I hope that you learned what you needed to. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next time.